It is wonderful to see you all in fine form, and for me, it's very nice to be able to introduce a piano that's even older than I am. And not many times I can say that these days. However, in welcoming you to this place and this building, this church, this sanctuary and this ecumenical centre, just to say that the toilets are out that way, and in the event of a fire, we evacuate without question, and we take the exits either down the stairs there, the way you came in, or across the roof through the hall. You will be directed in that case. I think those are all the necessary things to say, except that refreshments are served afterwards. There's no interval as such. We go straight through with the programme. But it's wonderful to welcome Michael here to come and celebrate the centenary of this venerable grand piano. He's younger than the piano, and his youthful vigour will show, as you will experience as he speaks, and I'm sure plays as well. But there's one other person without whom none of Michael's magic will be possible.
He's just switched off at the moment.
And that is John Tyrrell. If nobody tunes pianos, he's rubbish. It's got to be in tune, it's got to work perfectly, all the balance has got to be right, and that's a skill, a science, and an art. And we say thank you to John for making that possible.
Mavis is on there.
You will see some extraordinary photographs that take you into the arcane world of piano tuning, but that's to come. Now, it sounds as though we're still sorting the programme out, but it was sorted out before, honest, I'll tell you.
Yeah, anyway, well, I'll have to make do with what's there, okay. Hello, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's a slight technical thing here. To best laid plans, I sort of sent all the images and everything weeks in advance and everything. Anyway, lovely to see you all, and I'll see what turns up on here. Anyway, the first one, well, I'll just explain from the start. I put the first title as From Factory to Canteen. Well, the canteen will be Terry's. That's been much later on. But the factory is actually Bechstein's factory, and I'm just going to give a brief history. The first part is going to be from the 19th century, a sort of potted history of how the piano came to Redditch. Then I'll focus on Redditch itself, and we'll go into the Second World War, and then I'll finish the first half with reference to the Have a Go broadcast, when Violet Carson played this piano as part of the Have a Go series of broadcasts. I'll say all about that later on. So let's get started, okay? So this was actually after the war, when I'll have to explain why the Crown returned to Wigmore Street, because it's quite a story. But going back to the beginning, we all know that German pianos were a tremendous vogue in Europe and in Britain, and it meant that British companies really had to compete. But there were two big names. There were lots of German piano factories, but the two big names were Carl Bechstein and Julius Bluthner. Carl Bechstein was born in 1826, and Julius Bluthner actually beat him by 2 years, 1824. But I'm going to just mention the two of them briefly for the moment, because they both got going in 1853. Bechstein had apprenticed to an engineering firm and cabinet firm, so when he got started making pianos, he knew what he was about, and that was in Berlin. Bluthner started in Leipzig in the same year. And the reason I'm just going to mention Bluthner briefly is because this is a Bechstein, and if you do 2 or 3 minutes walk across the road to St. Stephen's, you've got an 1856 period Bluthner concert grand in the church there. And that's one of the earliest Bluthner concert grands. And some friends of mine in Berlin on holiday in Germany in 2009, they took me to Leipzig on a day trip. We went to the Old Instruments Museum, and there was a Bluthner concert grand. And I said to my friends, there's one of those exactly like that in St. Stephen's, Redditch. And they said, does it still play? But anyway, that's Bluthner out of the way. Now let's concentrate on Bechstein. Now, before I go any further, we've come here to hear the piano rather than me waffling on. So I should play a piece of Bach, Arioso from one of the keyboard concertos arranged by Alfred Cortot. Thank you very much. So as I said, Bechstein got going in 1853. I believe that by 1862, they'd established a shop of some sort in London. Bechstein was a very clever salesman, by the way. He wasn't just an engineer. There are reasons why, not just the quality of the pianos, but why he was able to, he was very well connected. And if you look at the old Bechsteins, some of the ones older than this, they've got these very, if you look in the soundboard, they've got these elaborate piano makers to the Kaiser and the Princess of so-and-so, all the Kaisers, and the crowned heads of Europe, basically. They like to show these things off. But we do know that in 1889, the main shop opened in Wigmore Street, which is this one. That was established. But the big event happened in 1901 when they created the concert hall, which then was called, to you now it's called the Wigmore Hall, but then it was called Bechstein Hall. It cost £100,000. It opened on the 31st of May 1901, and two great artists joined together, the violinist Eugenie Zai and the pianist Ferruccio Busoni. Now, there would have been an image of Busoni on there, but it isn't on there, unfortunately. And Busoni at that time was considered the greatest pianist in the world, and that in a golden age of pianists, right? But he wanted to concentrate on composition, but of course he was so busy having to do concert tours all the time. And he played in England a lot. Now, again, another image I'd like to have had on there is he played for Malvern Concert Club on the 11th of March, 1905. And it's called Signor Busoni. And at the bottom it says Bechstein Concert Grand. So they obviously got a concert grand in for the concert in Malvern. So he played a lot in England, went to America a lot, and of course in Europe. Now, so we have this period at the beginning of the 20th century where German pianos are all the rage, and British pianos have to compete. There must have been a certain amount of enmity, I'd have thought. And then, you all guess what I'm going to say next, don't you? Everything went well for German pianos until 1914, World War I, when they were practically being thrown out the windows, I think. And that gave the British piano manufacturers their chance. A cabal of them, headed by a chap called William Boosey, who was the brother of Leslie Boosey of Boosey and Hawkes, if you want to know that connection. He ran Chapel pianos, and they're a big make, they're a big British make. And they collided, and I've got the text here from a book about all this. When the war started, an alliance of local piano manufacturers, headed by William Boosey, pressed the London County Council not to renew the concert license of the Bechstein Hall. And then the government brought in a Trading with the Enemy Act, all right? And that enabled the Board of Trade, at what was known at that time, to order the entire enterprise to be sold in public auction, all right? Now, the auction took place on the 7th of November 1916, so the Bechstein Hall became out of use for 2 years almost. Described in the papers in the Times as one of the most remarkable ever held in London. Would you believe who won the bid? Debenhams acquired the whole lot for £56,500. It included the leasehold conveyance of the Bechstein Hall, plus 104 grand pianos, 30 upright pianos, a fleet of delivery vans, and tuning contracts on over 3,000 pianos in the UK, which netted between £6,000 and £7,000 a year. So there we are, that's war booty for you, isn't it? So a new license was put through government, and so on the 16th of January 1917, the new name Wigmore Hall came into being. Now, of course, if you hear Radio 3 on a Monday, you can hear live from Wigmore Hall, and the Wigmore Hall is still one of the most prestigious venues for pianists, chamber music, and so on, singers, and so on, to this day. But it started officially on the 16th of January 1917. But I don't think the image is on here. You've got the showroom, but I'll just check. No, it's not. What a shame. Because what I was going to show you was a concert program from 1917 given by Benno Mazejevich. Now, Benno Mazejevich was a Russian pianist who was born in Odessa in the time when Odessa was in the Russian Empire, not in Ukraine. But he became a naturalized British citizen. He came to England in the 1900s, established a very distinguished career, and became very, very world famous, of course. But he was a British citizen by then. The program I was going to show you was where it says Wigmore Hall. It gives a program for the Allies. So you have British music, French music, and Russian music. No German music. All right? And at the bottom, what did it say? Chapel Grand Pianoforte. All right. So, sacrilege. So Boosey got his way there, didn't he? He got a Chapel Grand Piano. Anyway, all was not lost because the war came to an end, as we know, in 1918, and there was obviously renegotiations back, and Bechstein got it back. The crown returns to Wigmore Street, and there's the Bechstein sort of logo there. So that brings us now to after the war. And then now, I'll just finish this bit off, but I'm going to come on to Redditch shortly. It's amazing how these things happen. I should have mentioned that Edwin Bechstein, who was one of the sons of Karl, born 1859, he married, of course, and had the next father in the next generation. But he and his wife, Helene, became rather close, a bit too close for my reckoning, to Adolf Hitler. And I won't go into this story now, but one of the sons, Karl, the next generation, was actually pushed out of the firm because he hated Hitler and wanted nothing to do with him. I should mention that Edwin died in 1934, and Hitler attended his state funeral in Berlin. So he had a state funeral as the successor to the piano firm, but of course there was other agenda going on as well. And I'll just briefly tell you that in that 1933, the great German-American pianist Rudolf Serkin was a great friend of Karl Bechstein, the grandson. And when he heard that Karl was pushed out of the firm and Helen took over and her daughter Lottie, I'll say more about that in a moment, he was so angry. He was in London recording the Brahms Horn Trio with his father-in-law, Adolf Busch, and Aubrey Brain, the great horn player, the father of Dennis Brain. And he was playing Sirkin was playing on a Bechstein, right, in the HMV studios. They got most of the way through, and two things happened. Aubrey Brain, by accident, reversed his car over his horn and flattened it. Rudolph heard that his friend Carl Bechstein had been pushed out the firm, and he was so angry he said, right, I'm not playing Bechstein anymore. That's the end of it. And so he said to HMV, we're going to have a Steinway. And of course, Aubrey Brain had to get himself a new horn. So they redid the entire sessions again, and the commercial recording of the Brahms horn trio is the one I've just explained to you. But I've got a special CD release which includes some of the takes of the original recording. And you can hear the timbre of the piano is different, and of course the horn timbre is different as well. Really fascinating, isn't it? So anyway, just to wind this bit up, so that's what happened. Helen and daughter Lottie took over. Should just mention, by the way, that after the war, there was a Bechstein factory in London. And I can't tell which part, I don't know which, I've talked about it with John, I don't know which part of London it was in. But they specialised in making these nice little 4'8" boudoir grands. And my chemistry master at school, when I was at secondary school, was a very good pianist, and he used to play piano duets, even in school concerts. And he had a 4'8" Bechstein. And it played beautifully. And it had on the frame, Bechstein London. So they specialised in that. Anyway, we're coming to the World War II again, and I'm afraid poor old Lottie, very pro-Hitler, got her comeuppance because she came over to visit the factory, discuss some business details. War broke out in autumn. She got nabbed, put in, not in the Isle of Man at that time. I think they started arresting Germans as enemy aliens, weren't they? They were interned at Huyton in Liverpool, and then eventually on the Isle of Man. So she ended up on the Isle of Man. She wasn't very popular because she was seen as a collaborator. And eventually, it was a prisoner exchange that got her out, much to the annoyance of everyone else. So that's the story of Bechstein. Oh dear, can't make this up, can I? Anyway, now let's come on to what's more interesting. I must play some more music in a minute anyway. I mentioned Brahms, didn't I? So actually, Bechstein's are very suited to Brahms' music, actually. I should say, by the way, I've got a Bechstein Grand at home, which is bigger than this one, 6'8". And it was made in 1898, so I call it a year older than Brahms, because Brahms died in 1897. So let's have a Brahms intermezzo on this one. Thank you very much. If anyone wants to ask me, by the way, which concert launched the first Bechstein Grand, I'll just briefly mention that it was actually 1857. In January 1857, in Berlin, the first public concert involving the Bechstein Concert Grand was the world premiere of Liszt's Piano Sonata in B minor, but not played by the composer. Of course, Liszt was the greatest pianist in the world at the time, but played by his son-in-law, Hans von Bülow, who had married Cosima around that time. And Bülow became particularly famous both as a pianist and as a conductor, particularly later in the 19th century. His misfortune was that Richard Wagner came along and stole his wife. So Cosima became Cosima Wagner, and of course that produced the next generation of the Wagner family. And don't ask me to go for all the connections with Wagner and Hitler, I haven't got time. I could do, but I haven't got time. Oh dear me, this is incredible, isn't it? I often used to joke that the musical world is not just a very interconnected world, it's a very incestuous world as well. Anyway, back to more respectable things. Now, moving on to Redditch, right. So this piano arrived in 1924 installed in South Crest Manor. Now, I think we actually have got a picture of South Crest Manor on here. Let's have a look. Right. Yeah, let's have a look. Yes. Yeah, there we are. Does that come up? Right. That's it. There we are. There's South Crest Manor. And Charles Terry was actually the son. Herbert Terry had started it, I think, but Charles was the real entrepreneur, and he really built up the business and got things going. But what I don't know is when I think the piano was obviously in the house for quite a period of time, but when it made its way to the factory, we're not quite sure, but I'll elaborate more on that later on. So Terry's, of course, was one of the famous factories in Redditch, as you all know, and I always think it's, sorry to go back to Germany again, but the Nazis again, but Redditch was so well known for its industry, which is why it was targeted for bombing in the war. The late Tony Carr, who was a member of Redditch Operatic, I'll come on to the twinning do's later on, told me either on a holiday in Germany or somewhere here, he'd seen an exhibition of the Luftwaffe bombing plans, as they were, and Redditch, of course, has pinpointed the factories. They knew exactly where the factories were. So they were very devious, weren't they? Anyway, I'm going to now talk about a young lady who worked at Terry's, and then she got so bored with it that she decided she'd take up singing. All right, I'm sure you know who I'm going to talk about. Try and find her on here. Let's have a look. Oh, by the way, there's that's a picture of a letter from Charles Terry. You can see his signature on there. Not quite sure what the letter's about. It's hard to read, but there's his signature if you want to see it anyway. And of course, there's the factory. And there it is again, right? Now, let's have a look. I think she's going to be here somewhere. Yes, there we are. Right, okay. Right. Yes, there's two images of Mavis on here, but by the way, the one I originally chose was this cigarette card. Mavis became so famous in the 30s that there were, I think Will cigarettes were famous in those days. We don't talk about smoking these days, do we? But they did these Will cigarette cards, and if you're really famous, you end up on a cigarette card, as Mavis did. So there we are. Anyway, I'm going to. I didn't want this one because she's much older. Although she's obviously on stage, although she's talking, isn't she? There, and that reminds me that she came to Redditch Town Hall in 1984 and gave a talk about her life, and I was there. But it appears that she did an interview for Radio 4, an arts program, and I don't know when I heard it the first time, but in 1990 it was repeated again, because the announcer announced at the end, you're going to hear a short excerpt in a moment, announced her death in 1990, a few weeks earlier, so this must have been a repeat. So I'm going to ask Keith, we can put on the track of Mavis talking. This is from the radio program. It's about 5 minutes.
Track one, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, yeah. That's it, track one.
Mavis Bennet talked to me for a long time about her life, her many recordings of ballads as well as operatic arias, her time with the Old Vic Opera Company under the formidable Lillian Bayliss, her marriage to the conductor Stanford Robinson, and her appearances as Minnie Haha in those amazing productions of Hiawatha done as an opera conducted by Dr. Malcolm Sargent at the Albert Hall. A throat operation just before the war cut short her singing career, but she'd continued to teach and had many pupils who went on to glory of their own. How did it all start? This is what she told me.
I joined the Doily Cart on my 21st birthday, Easter Monday, 1921. Before that, I'd been in a lot of amateur shows.
Was it a great step forward for you to join the Doily Cart? It must have taken a certain amount of courage to stop being amateur and go into the profession.
Well, no, it wasn't. When I was 14, the war came. And I was a tiny little thin little thing. And I went into Terry's factory where they made springs and used to put a spring in a hole and pour a big heavy press round. And I was 14 years old. And then I got rather tired of that and I determined I must do something better. And the lovely one woman who'd been teaching me to sing in Redditch, Mrs. Charles Slater, felt that I should go to Birmingham for lessons. I found a man called Sidney Stoddard who heard me sing. By the way, I must tell you that not one penny had ever been spent on my musical education or anything, and I won no prizes in festivals.
So you never went to anything like the Royal College or the Academy or anything of that sort?
So I went to this Sidney Stoddard, but he taught me to sing a great aria called Ocean Thou Mighty Monster from Oberon, which started a very high, Ocean Thou Mighty Monster, that lies curled like a green serpent round about the world. And I sang that to Rupert Doily Cart. So I joined the Doily Cart through that.
First of all, his Toro, and very no going easy going talent in the new pop law, the Toro. To play the field and play off, the old show the play off, and very no going easy going talent in the new pop law, the Toro. And very no going easy going talent in the new pop law, the Toro.
In 1921, the Doily Cart must have been going really strong, wasn't it?
Very strong. And I was with all the old Savoyards.
The originals.
Yes, the Derek Oldham, Leo Sheffield, Sidney Granville, and Elsie Griffin was one of the sopranos. So I understudied every part in the company.
Was this good grounding, do you think, for operatic
yes.
roles?
I learnt all my stagecraft from sitting in a little chair on the side of the stage, watching. And then I got itchy feet, became ambitious to go and try my luck in London. I tramped London for the agents. HMV saw me and they said, yes, a lovely voice, but go and make a name. Well, in the end, I got a chance to sing at the Palladium. It's Sunday night at the Palladium. And there was this little figure on this great stage singing a big coloratura aria, A Forse Louis from Traviata. And then I sang very simple songs. And one of them was One Morning Very Early, which everybody loved. And that was the first record I ever did for HMV.
that part of the program took about 15 minutes. She goes on to talk about the famous Hiawatha presentations at the Albert Hall and all that, and about her teaching career and so on. It's fascinating. So if it's in BBC Sound Archives, all the better, or whether it's online, I can't tell you. I found it on an old cassette. I took it off the radio in 1990, so there we are. So, yes, dear Mavis, bell-like sound, is it? Beautiful top notes, incredible. And she went on to teach two people I'm going to be talking about in the second half of the program as well. So we have the World War II starts, and so on and so on. And then after the war, there was a famous radio program started called Have a Go, presented by Wilfrid Pickles and his wife Mabel. I'm sure you all remember. Now, the pianist for those was this lady, and I'm going to show the picture I prefer of her, which is this one, right? I won't show the picture of Ina Sharples because she looks like a terrible bag lady, which I don't think is really appropriate. And this is how she would like to be known. And because Violet Carson trained as a pianist and as a singer. She obviously went into stage acting and went into TV, as we all know. But she started off as a pianist, and she was a pianist. The program started in 1946, and it went through to 1952. It carried on into the 1960s, of course, but her last program was 16th of April 1952, by which time she played for 159 programs. And that particular program was like a retrospective focusing on her, which is rather nice, isn't it? But anyway, when I tried to track down, I found that the broadcast from... Now, this is on the website, it said 7th of April 1948, Redditch, Worcestershire. That's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you the venue. Now, we've had some controversy over this because I've always felt that it was by this time, the piano was in the factory canteen. And that's the sort of setting that would have been ideal for the radio programs because they travel around these sort of places in the factories and so on. So I'm going to stay with that. I've had somebody say that they thought it was chloride batteries, but I don't know anything about chloride batteries. So I'm going to stick with Terry's factory for now, unless anyone stands up and says no. You know, I don't want to create any antagonisms anyway. So I'm going to stick with Terry's factory. But the thing is that the programs were not live. They took place, right? They were recorded. And then a few weeks they were all edited up because a lot of times with Mabel and Wilfrid, they had interviewing people on spec, you know, and so on. Things could have gone wrong. So everything was recorded, then it was edited up, and then brought. So the broadcast date is the 7th of April 1948. That's what I've got down, it's 1948. And what Violet Carson used to do was she was a warm-up act. She'd get everyone doing community singing, and get them all sort of going like that. So, of course, when the program started, you hear her play the piano, of course, and then the program started. So that was Violet Carson career until, of course, Coronation Street took over. So, that's as far as I want to go for the first half for now, to bring us up to the war. In the second half, later on, I'm going to bring us up into the 1970s and focus on when the piano used to be in Bates Hill Methodist Wesleyan Chapel, as I remember it in the 1970s. And then I'll talk about the concert organizations that use the piano and so on, and there'll be a lot more about that. But just to finish with then, we must finish with some more music, mustn't we? And I'd mentioned that the first concert, the Bechstein Concert Grand, was 1857, the Liszt Sonata. And so here's the middle section. I'm going to play the middle section of the sonata. It's a big work. It's a half an hour. No time for that. But I'll play the middle section. So just to remember that this piece owed its fame to being played on the Bechstein Grand. Right. Thank you very much. So that's the middle part of the piece that was played on the first Bechstein Grand in public in 1857. So this brings us to the sort of middle part now, isn't it? Okay, if you want to take over, John. And I was going to suggest that when we show the images will be shown of John's wonderful work to get this piano into such wonderful state. We are going to hear in the background, as a background recording, there's some, I've talked about the Romantics in England, but I should just tell you that this disc came out just recently, Midland's Pianists on Air, and these are off-air live broadcasts which are not in BBC Sound archives. They've been rescued from private collections that I've had access to, and the 7 pianists on here. I'll just quickly mention the names in case any of them ring bells to you. Tom Bromley, Marjorie Hazelhurst, Lily Niblett, Harold Rich, John Brennan, Edna Isles, and George Mantle-Child. So we're going to hear, and on these selections, it's a 2 CD set, by the way, and each one's nearly 80 minutes long, so you don't get sold short on this. There are some pieces for 2 pianos played by Tom Bromley and Mantle-Child. So when we're showing the images, the pictures shortly, or whatever, we're going to hear, I'll let that run, those 2 piano pieces. So what do we do now? Do we have, it's a sort of intermission, isn't it?
Stay where we are.
Right.
And we're going to have a little break to look at some pictures that show the kind of work necessary to be done to maintain a piano of that age in the excellent condition that it is. And in watching these images and hearing the music being played, have in mind John Tyrrell and the whole profession he represents, but he particularly has nursed this piano since it was a baby. Well, not quite a baby, but quite a long time, really. And if you sound as good as that piano when you're 100, you'll be doing all right. Mm-hmm. So just take a break, take a relax, look at the pictures, wonder at them. And if you don't know what they're all about, over the refreshments at the end, ask John, because he's got the answers. He knows. He's been inside the piano and turned it upside down and pulled it apart and put it back together again. But meanwhile, thank you, Michael.
That's all right.
Take a seat.
Okay, right. Right. Thanks very much, Keith.
This is the Midland Home Service. This evening we're broadcasting a concert given by Dorothy Hemming, violin, accompanied by Albert Webb, and Tom Bromley and Mantle-Child, 2 pianos. The concert begins with an arrangement for 2 pianos by Beckett Williams of Mortify Us by Thy Grace by Bach.
clever arrangement. Something extra gets in the way in the middle. That. And then the Scherzo from the Third Suite by Anton Arensky, who taught Rachmaninoff. I should say, by the way, that's a miracle you're hearing those. In 1989, the chap who recorded those off the radio, Charles Harper, is an amateur pianist in Sutton Coldfield. He died. I was told by a friend that he died, and I said to him, get the car, get a van. So he did. Well, he got a big car. We drove over as the family were clearing the house, and all the tapes, 200 reel-to-reel tapes, were about to go in the skip. And I said, they're not going in the skip, they're going in the car. And quite a number of those live off-air broadcasts are on that discs, on those CDs. So had it not been for that initiative, they would have been lost forever, because BBC Sound Archives haven't got them, I can tell you that. So we're moving on now. I found the picture of Mavis, by the way, the other picture. So, and it says on there, she died in January 1990, and that excerpt you heard, the announcer at the end, the later bit you didn't hear, said she just died, and this was played in tribute. So there it is, that was broadcast again in 1990. So there we are. So we're on to part 2 now. We're bringing it back into the 1970s. And of course, how many of us remember this building? Beautiful, isn't it? Why couldn't they preserve these things? I mean, when you think of the sacrilege that happened in the 1960s and 70s, did you know in the 1960s, the Worcester Cathedral, the Lich Gate and Lich Street was destroyed? The only cathedral lich gate in the country. I had an interest in that because my paternal grandfather was born in Lich Street in Worcester a long, long time ago. But when I came to investigate the pictures, I had to go to the library and find the archive pictures. It's a shopping centre now, Lich Gate. Terrible. Damn, to put these councillors up against the wall. There aren't any councillors here. So I put them against the wall and shoot a lot of them. But anyway, I didn't hear that. So that's as I do remember it in 1970. I should just mention that I played this piano in Bates Hill. We can't quite tell when it arrived in Bates Hill. And the pictures here of the interior, I don't think the piano's there. It may have been a room downstairs. They used to do all the electoral counting, by the way. It was a counting room downstairs. I do remember that in elections. There's another one. What I like about these churches, everyone worships the organist. When I did the first Christmas concert with the Redditch Choral Society in December 1973, I was perched up in the organ, and it was done with orchestra and the Choral Society and everything. And I remember giving the note for the players, by the way, and the pitch was sharp because the oboes looked at it and said, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it." It wasn't a semitone sharp; it was in between. So, and I remember that because I got perfect pitch, although it's going a bit off now. But I do remember it being sharp, as it was. And I think the pipework came into the organ here when Trevor Tipple put it in. It was Halmshaw pipework from Birmingham, by the way. Anyway, so I think there's maybe another one. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. There's those 3 images over there. Now, so you do remember, I'm sure I can ask if some of you remember that. Yes. Right. Oh, right. Well, you remember it then. Right. Yeah, oh, right. It's probably off the picture, isn't it? But I think that, now, yes, I'm going to come on to that because I mentioned the first concert I took part in December 1973, but before then, and we cannot find it in the Redditch Choral Society archives. I did an informal concert, and I should just mention, of course, in those days, I'm sure you all know straight away, there she is. Well, there's a young Alma Bright, in the days when Alma was playing for Children's Hour on the Beeb, on radio. No, it would have been the Midlands, again, this is all Midlands region, of course. And she, I should just say, by the way, how I got to know Alma, she was doing teaching practice. She was trained to be a teacher, obviously doing her teaching certificate. She came to a girls' school I was at King's Heath Boys Technical School in King's Heath, and across the common, of course it was always quite a joke, because this Billesley Common, about a mile away, was the girls' school, Swanson's Grammar and Swanson's Bilateral. And of course I'm sure that the Educational Authority, that's a good distance for a boys' and a girls' school. Anyway, we got round that because the two music masters, the various music masters, thought we can't have this, we can't have two separate schools. So we're going to have more concerts and enable boys and girls to mix together. And that's what happened. So when I went over, we did the joint concert. Who should turn up? But Alma. She wasn't the music director. She was doing teaching practice, and we got talking, and she could play the piano, and she sang to people as well. And I remember that. And then obviously she graduated and went off and did her teaching. You see. So, but anyway, she kept in touch with me, and then she said about the Choral Society, and she asked me to come over and do a concert in Bates Hill. It must have been 1972. Or possibly 73, but before the Christmas concert. And she said, can you bring a friend of yours from college? I was at the Birmingham School of Music in those days. And I said, yes, I've got a friend who's a cellist, Ian Ludford. He later went into the CBSO, rank and file, actually. He's just retired a few years ago. And he came over with me, and we had, there was myself and Ian. I remember we played Vivaldi Cello Sonata and some other pieces. And Alma, and now sadly she died last year, but Enid Wynne Thomas, you all remember Enid, the Welsh contralto, she sang some chansons, softly, I think it was the famous song Softly Wakes My Heart, with Alma accompanying. And I played a couple of Chopin solos, including the Berceuse in D flat. So the very first piece I played, apart from the cello music, chamber music, on this piano in 1972/3 was a Chopin Berceuse. So let's have that. Thank you. Now, at that time, the piano felt fine, you know, sounded fine in the church and everything, no problems. But in 1978, well, I'll just stay with 1970 for the moment because, by the way, there's a nice picture of Alma, as most of us remember her. That's a Neumeier Grand, by the way, and it's still at the family house in Studley, as far as I can recall. And also, of course, there he is, there's Jason, Alma's brother. And now I should just mention that both Alma and Jason had lessons with Mavis Bennett. You probably know the story that Mavis Bennett had this tremendous career. She really took off in the 1930s. She's even on a Pathé film. I have seen it. It might be online, actually. Real 1930s, and she stands and sings for you. So if you can search that out, do. But I have seen it, not for a long time. And, but apparently she had to have some sort of throat operation. It must have been by Baptist, it was thyroid, I don't know. And then she said that something didn't feel right anymore, and so she wanted to stop singing. So she devoted her life to teaching. And so she taught a whole range of people, including Jason and Alma. And I think, well, with a voice like Mavis, I'm sure that she must have a great influence on her pupils, and no doubt about it. So I'm now going to talk now about the organisations that I know I'd like to know is what date was the Wesleyan Chapel closed down and demolished? Was it 1975-ish, sort of that? You know, roughly what? Yeah, roughly. Yes. Right, but it finishes a liturgical building in 1975. Yeah. So, right. So there we are then. So mid 1970s. And right. Ah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was a crossover point, yeah. So there we are. So sad that glorious building is no more. It's a shame, isn't it? But so it meant that various concert organisations, I'm going to come on to that now, came here when the piano came here. And I should just mention a few of them because I had very little to do with the Redditch Music Society. But I did do some playing for them, and here I must pay special tribute to the late Anne Davis, who was the secretary, who was wonderfully amenable. She would just phone me up and say, Michael, we've got an AGM coming up. We want to have finish with a half-hour piano recital. Would you like to come? Yeah, of course, I said, yes. Okay, right. And we discussed all the arrangements, and there it was. Wonderful, isn't it? Those golden days when people just phone you up like that, no frills or anything. Anyway, later on, I'm going to play some music from that recital I gave, a half-hour program, a little later on. So that was the music club, but I should just mention they had some very, I was down the bottom of rather low down the scale in those days. They had some very prestigious artists who came and played for them. I'll just show, let's go back to Redditch for a moment while they're all in order. There's a program from 1970, still in Bates Hill. And I should just tell you, by the way, that that's a marvellous name for a pianist, isn't it? Michael Stride. But he changed his name to Simon Ballard. Strange. He was a brilliant player, marvellous musician. And, but his name, and he used to broadcast as Michael Stride on the Midland region. I think he's only slightly older than me, actually. I don't think he's not ancient. He'll only be in his 70s now. So I did meet him a few times, but not at this concert, but I've met him since. But anyway, there he is. That's that program. But I want to come on to what's next. That's the Choral Society, yes, right. Now I want to find, what's that one? Yes, now, that's in Ecumenical. It says 1982, and the pianist, this is for the Music Society, and you'll notice that the pianist is Bernard Dascali. Now, Bernard Dascali was a blind French pianist. He was a finalist in the Leeds International Piano Competition. And so his career took off, and I remember hearing him a lot and seeing him on television. He's one of the few pianists where Charles Groves, the conductor in the final, had to watch him because, of course, he couldn't see, so he was playing beautifully, wonderful control. So the conductor had to look at him. So I always remember that, they say. So that's Bernard Dascali, and he was playing French music, Ravel and Messiaen, as well as Mozart and Chopin. And then at the same time, I can't say the date, is that 1990? That might be nice. It should be 1982 as well. The German pianist Wolfgang Manz was also a Leeds finalist. And it says here, for John and Helen, with compliments and best wishes. I think that John had tuned the piano, you know. That's the only reason we can think. John tuned the piano, and he's got a signed program from Wolfgang Manz. I remember Manz, well, again, marvellous players, you know, wonderful musicians. And they came and played here. But I'm going to say something that I shouldn't quite say out of turn. I told you that when I played for that informal concert in Bates Hill, the piano was lovely, felt fine, no problem. When I came to play for that brief program I've told you about in 1983, a year after these two great artists came and played, the piano action was nowhere near as good as it is now. John had restrung the piano in 1978. And so, of course, as a concert instrument, that transformed the sound, obviously. But the mechanism, I have to say, left something to be desired at the time. And I'm saying that from experience because when I came to play the piano myself, so it's rather interesting that these marvellous players were booked by the Music Society playing on a piano, which sounds very nice now, but I think they probably had to struggle with it, you know, as I remember from my own experience from that same period. I've spoken with John about it, and he said, yes, the action was completely redone, but later, a later date than what I've just told you. So sometime in the 1980s, he did a complete rebuild on it, and of course it's what it is now. And so we had, and there should be some other programs here. Let's have a look. Yeah. That's right. Now that's the Sing It Yourself Messiah. I'm playing the organ on there, and who's conducting it? Alma's conducting, that's right. So that was a Sing It Yourself Messiah. Is that 1990, I think? Yeah. Can't see it very clearly. What else have we got? There's a Christmas concert at the Ecumenical Centre. And also, I can remember, oh, there it is, yes, the Petite Messe Solennelle. I'm sure some of us remember the Petite Messe Solennelle, don't we? That's right. And, which, again, I was engaged to play for that. So, although actually, Rossini, by the way, wrote it for 2 pianos and harmonium. And the second piano, there isn't much to it. It doubles up the first piano. So I was the pianist. And I think for one of the performances, we used John Tyrrell's electric harmonium. No, we used a proper harmonium. It's a Yamaha harmonium. We've used that in the past, haven't we? So we've had concerts here. But I want to also refer briefly to the Operatic Society because, you know, I hope the images are on here. There's some missing, unfortunately. Yeah, I think I'm going to be out of luck on that one. I got to know people from the Operatic, and I got involved in some twinning duos, as we call them, you know, a twin with Auxerre. And I took part in 3 concerts. And in 1977, 79, and 81, and a group from the Operatic, and I think a bunch of other associations, to form a choir called Concord, C-O-N-C-O-R-D. And they had, I had to direct the first one, actually, because they didn't find a conductor. In 1979, they did have the conductor of the Operatic, I forget his name, but he conducted, and likewise for the 1981 one. Now, what was my connection with the British Operatic? Well, in 1976, I was booked by the then conductor, Barry Barker, sadly no longer with us, to play Song of Norway, or rather the end bit of Song of Norway, because as you probably know, the end bit is a ballet on stage with the Grieg Piano Concerto, a potted version of the Grieg Piano Concerto, which I knew well at that time. And so I played for the week in the pit on the Steinway in the Palace Theatre, and I played for that bit of the Grieg Concerto for Song of Norway, and that's how I got to know the Operatic and those twinning duos. But one of the positive things that came out of it was that I met Auxerre's composer. Now, I hope he's on here. Let's see, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Will he, won't he? Oh dear, not very hopeful. Oh, wait a minute. Aha. There's a picture there. There's the picture. There's the Bechstein catalogue. Oh no, oh dear. It's not on here. There's a I had a picture of the French composer Jean-Jacques Loubry, who I got to meet. He lived in Auxerre, of course, and I got to know him, and he gave me some of his piano music. And he was, by profession, he was what we call an acupuncture. He was an acupuncturist. But he had a magnificent house in Boulevard Vauban, and he had an old Steinway concert grand with the round legs, and a two-manual pipe organ in his music studio. Amazing. And a tremendous library of music. Anyway, he gave me some of his piano music. I should also mention, by the way, that Redditch Council commissioned a choral piece from him called The Spider and the Fly, which was performed by Redditch Choral, I think in Norgrove Court, with a composer conducting. Was there anyone there? Ursula, were you there? Do you remember it? Okay, right. Okay, there's somebody there who remembers it. Right. And that was, I actually may have been commissioned for Redditch Choral Society, one or the other anyway. I didn't hear the work myself, but I got to know Jean-Jacques' piano music. And I thought now, as I'm winding towards the end, I'm going to play some of these preludes, because I think his dates, by the way, are 1915 to 2001, and he's completely unknown in Britain apart from the local connection here. If you look at me online, it gives you a list of his works, it gives you some history about it. It was a wonderful, he spoke superb English, by the way, and it was quite humorous as well. He could tell very funny stories, including about the musicians he'd studied with at the Paris Conservatoire. A very interesting man, and he wrote. He also wrote reviews of the concerts, the Concord concerts we did as well, and they took place in the theatre in Auxerre. The piano kept changing. The one year it was a Petrov. They're all nice pianos, and the other year it had Pleyel, French make, fabriqué en Braunschweig. Now Braunschweig is Brunswick in Germany. So it was made in Germany, it wasn't made in France anymore. And this is the trouble with a lot of these makes these days. I think Bechstein still make Bechsteins in Berlin, you would be pleased to know. But a lot of these makes, when you see a modern piano, it'll say a Broadwood or a Brinsmead or whatever. If you look inside, it's made in China. They bought up all the names, and they're all made in China now. That's just terrible, isn't it? The Kemble was the last piano factory to close, and it was on the national news in the 1990s. And if you want to see a Kemble piano, if you go to the Elgar School in Worcester, in the concert room, it's a small little concert room, there's a Kemble Grand, and it's very nice. And that's one of the last Kemble pianos. So what I'm going to do now, to finish with, I'm going to play 4 preludes by Jean-Jacques, because I think you must hear, I think they're beautiful, really. I have played, he wrote 24 preludes and published in 2 volumes. And I'm going to play numbers 10, 11, let's get them in the right order, that's right, and 17 and 20. That's it, right. There'll be some shuffling of pages as we go along. But, here we go. lovely music, isn't it? Why don't we hear it? It's extraordinary. Anyway, so that brings everything to an end as far as I'm concerned. I want to say special thanks to John for inviting me to do this, and to Keith managing the sound system and everything. And it's lovely to come back here again, and I'm sure the Ready to Choral will be back here at some point or other. And so it only leaves me to thank you very much for coming, and there's some refreshments later on, and there are copies on sale of both these CDs for those who are interested. It's outside, isn't it, I think, yes. So thanks John, yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. That's right, yes. The piano at its best, and the best of pianists. Thank you so much for a wonderful afternoon, so informative. A lot of local stuff, a lot of international stuff, a lot of varied music, and all evidence of the skills of a piano tuner, without which none of this would be possible. So, by way of thank you, I'm asking Mary to come forward, please. And I'm going to preach a sermon. Oh, no, I'm not. That's for Michael. Michael, with our very sincere and profound thank you, a little gift for you from Emmanuel Church.
Right.
To thank you so much.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And because of what I've said about piano tuning, a little gift for John to say thank you for caring for this piano and making it ever brilliant. It is just so good, thanks to your long, professional, skilled attention. Thank you. And finally, one absent friend who's been very present, that is John's wife, Helen. She's been so supportive, so energetic, so committed and so enthusiastic in all that she sets her hand to. She's not here to give it to her, so just throw it away. No, give it to John. He'll give it to her. There we go. I missed what you said.
Pardon?
I missed what
I
you
said-
said.
She's gone to collect our grandson from school.
You can't do better than that. That's wonderful. Well, thank her for us, won't you? Right. Indeed, yes. And now we have a time for refreshment in the narthex out there. We don't want to take the cakes home with us, so do get them all up. You don't want to take the CDs home with you, so do buy them. Did you mention the price? £10 each. £10 each.
Two CD sets. So you get two CDs for £10.
And John Renard is on duty out there
Yeah.
to receive your gifts, your payment for the CDs. But now it's time for refreshments, so enjoy, folks. Lovely to see you all. Welcome you are indeed. Thank you, Michael, once again.
Right.